Hey everyone, and welcome to the September 1st episode of the Tom's Hardware Piecast. Gonna give it a second as always because I start to see the audience filtering in, and what fun is it with no audience? I want to point to the folks who are watching live that we have chat rooms on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. So if you have some questions or comments, and I hope you do, please shoot them at us and we will address during the show. If you are not watching or listening live, hopefully they had some really cool questions but otherwise we'll make this interesting for everyone, including those who are listening in audio only thereafter as a podcast, because you can get the show as a podcast. So this week, we're joined by Chris Crocker-White from who works full time for Bellina, makers of Bellina Etcher, which most Pi fans have used at one time or another to burn micro SD cards. And he's here to talk to us about some really cool projects. As always, I'm Avram Pelch, editor-in-chief of Tom's Hardware, and I'm joined by associate editor Les Pounder and Raspberry Pi expert Ash Puckett. And later in the broadcast, they will be talking about some cool things that they have encountered, and I will be walking folks through a quick tutorial on how to create your own custom keyboard shortcuts in Raspberry Pi OS. But let's start by talking with Chris, because Chris, you've done some really amazing work. Particularly, we were really impressed with your steampunk Geiger counter. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, well, thanks for the compliments. I'm glad to see it sort of got out there and inspired a lot of people and impressed people. But I guess I can bring it up on screen while we talk about it. So this is the project. If you haven't seen it already, I published the blog post probably maybe a couple months ago now, and it sort of did the round. So I guess some people have seen it. But this is a Raspberry Pi 3A inside here. And it's linked to one of the sort of cheaply available Geiger counter boards you can get on AliExpress and Amazon and all those kind of things. And I kind of thought, well, the board by itself, you turn it on and it clicks when there's radiation. It doesn't really look very good or do anything interesting. So I thought the first thing I'm going to do is hook it up to a Pi, and then I can start running InfluxDB and Grafana and get some nice, pretty graphs. But then it needed a case, and I sort of embarked on this quest that ended up with this thing. It took me quite a while to get there, but it was kind of, I had this vision of what it should look like, and I just kind of kept at it until it materialized.
Wow, that's great. So, can you show us how it works? Do you have anything radioactive around to test it with?
I do. So I don't know if I can turn on. So on the front panel we've got, this is the power switch. Obvious what that does. Then I added a sound switch, so you can turn on and off the clicking noise, because I thought if I've got it on the shelf or something, I don't want it clicking all the time. So if I turn that on, I'm not sure if my mic will pick up the clicking. I don't know if you can hear that. But so on every pulse, this is sort of your single digits increment, and then this is your tens, and then when it goes to 100, this lever will pull on the mechanical counter and count up. This is the Geiger tube itself here. And then we have some Nixie tubes that are displaying there goes the count, the counts per minute. So it's just sort of counting all the stuff, counting all the pulses in the last 60 seconds and showing that on the Geiger tubes. So you can see that's reading 32 now, 33, which is like a safe background level. But if I get my sound port from over here, this is it's a gas mantle from a gas lamp, sorry. And these have got thorium in them. It's quite safe, like in a bag. But if I place it on here, you'll see the lights. They start to go a bit crazy.
You can hear the clicks now.
Yeah, that was good. And you can see the numbers down the bottom are going up.
You're like one arm strap away from a Pip-Boy with that thing.
So yeah, I can probably I've got the dashboard that's posted on the Pi that's in there. I can show you as well. Let's have a quick look. So yeah, the Pi inside is running InfluxDB and Grafana, so it's counting those pulses. It's just a simple Python script that's running to count those pulses. Let's see if I can show you the dashboard as well. Here we go. I can share a tab. Here we go. So when Grafana fires up, this is all, so it's all running on the Pi inside and it's all containerized.
So while we're waiting for this to load, what inspired you to make it steampunk?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know. I kind of like the aesthetic. I like the sort of the dark wood and the glass and the brass and the copper. I like the way it all sort of looks together. And I've kind of built steam engines and other stuff that looks along this theme in the past as well. But I've never done anything sort of integrating that aesthetic with electronics. So I thought I'd give it a go. But I spent a lot of time sort of picking out fasteners, like which ones looked the best. So I had like a whole array of like stainless steel ones and brass ones and flat heads and square heads and all this kind of stuff. I just kept swapping them in and out to see which ones looked best. But yeah, you see. Oh, sorry, go on.
So Andrew asks if you could test the radioactivity of a banana.
You could.
Do you have any bananas?
I don't have any bananas to hand, but it's like bananas are only very slightly radioactive. So although you'd have to like put the bunch next to it, and you might see the graph go up like a tiny bit, but you see like from that sample I just did, there's a giant spike in the graph at the end. I mean, if I put this back over here again, you should see the. I'll leave it there for a bit. Can I balance that there? Or I'll hold it there. But if I hold it there for long enough, you can see the web interface. It should reflect what's happening. Refreshes every 10 seconds. There we go.
Huh. That is too cool.
Yes, I feel like I'm in the movie The Time Machine.
Oh, it's gone into the black now. I'm not sure what my color coding was on this gauge here. Yeah, it's just keeps going up and up and up. And so I put 3 digits on the basis that if the count ever went higher than 999, I've got bigger things to worry about than not having enough digits on my counter. So I thought 3 would be enough.
Yeah, fair enough. It's what an impressive work of art that really is.
Thank
So
you.
I know you had some other projects that you're also working on, including I know you mentioned a video wall.
Oh, this one here. Yeah. So this is shall I show you that one as well? I mean,
Yeah.
we can go fully into it. So if I grab, is my cable long enough? Let's grab this one. Let's go to the other camera. Okay. So yeah, I work for Balena as sort of makers of Balena Etcher, as a lot of people will know. But Etcher is not sort of our core business. What we also do is like fleet management for IoT devices, and so obviously that means you need a lot of devices for testing how that fleet management works. So this was one of my projects. Well, this is the actual hardware is sort of a project that our teams developed for that purpose, and we actually had this thing called the Beast, which I think was like 360 Raspberry Pis, and this is one part of that. It's called a Beast tile, and these are all modular, so you can stack them and integrate them, but each one works kind of on its own accord, and it has like an Ethernet switch in the back and a big power supply. So last weekend I was hacking on it and just trying to figure out if I can sort of synchronize a video and get it to play across all these different Pis. So there's a Python script I found on GitHub that's running. It controls GStreamer under the hood, I believe. And it's taking a video file and splitting each section out and sending that, or asking each Pi to play only that section. So behind each one of those screens there's a Pi, and you can see all the network cables down the center. It's it's a nice bit of hardware.
That looks great. That's really well synchronized.
Yeah, that's what I found quite impressive. We've done some work with multi-room audio, but we've never done sort of a multi-device video before, at least not that I know of anyway. So I thought it was quite a fun thing. And of course, I'm playing the Steamed Hams clip, which is my favorite test clip.
Aurora Borealis.
It's the exposure's not working quite well. There we go.
Chris, is there a hard limit of how many screens you can have? Or could you just go to an infinite amount of screens?
I think the script that I found wasn't quite an old project, but it was sort of maxing out at 9 to split one video. I think it was like the configuration string that it was sending to all the devices was just getting a bit long. But in theory, you could just keep going. I mean, it's something I'd like to get the rest of our team together and get the big beast going and see if we can make a giant video wall with like 200 Raspberry Pis.
Which is about as many as Les has in his house.
It's a couple off.
Yeah. But yeah, the cool thing is that obviously if you're building a device like this, you don't want to be going in and flashing each individual Raspberry Pi and setting up your code 12 times. So that's where the Balena stack comes in, and it lets you sort of apply the same software and same configuration, same containers to all those devices at once. So I can go into the dashboard and I can update them all in one go.
That's fantastic, especially for people who are doing things probably like clustering, where you're going to want to have it be a lot of things at once. So I know before the show started, we were talking a little bit about Balena's famous Etcher software, and that you're adding new features and building it out. So what are some of the new things that are going on that with Balena that people should know about and with Etcher?
I guess like what we're really keen to do is, well, so my official title is Hardware Hacker in Residence, and I head up the Balena Labs team at Balena. And so the Labs team is tasked with sort of exploring what our product can do and sort of communicating it to the world. And so we give up to 10 devices for free to anyone. So for the majority of people, not like us who have far too many Pis in their houses, but anyone who has a sane number of Pis is well under that 10 device limit. And then so we're building projects to try and like enable people who have that Raspberry Pi sitting in a box. They can run one of our projects and not have to get into the sort of ins and outs of learning to code or learning the terminal or bash scripts or anything like that. I mean, they can, but we want to sort of get people just to enable people to get off the ground. And then perhaps once they've got a device up and running, then they'll be a bit more inspired to dig into the code and start to figure things out for themselves. So with Etcher, you'll probably notice when you flash a card, it gives you an idea of a project you can build, and then you can click on that, and we try to make it as easy as possible. And we've almost got it down to a single click. It's probably like 2 or 3 clicks. And you can get an application deployed to a device, and you get success as quickly as possible, which hopefully inspires people to sort of dig in a bit more and figure out what else they can do. So we're keen to keep exploring that and sort of show off more community projects and promote people that are doing cool stuff.
You're quiet, Avram.
Sorry. Speaking of, that's really cool. Speaking of people who are doing cool stuff, I wanted to mention Ash. Today is September 1st as we're doing this, and that means that Ash's new list of projects of the month is up. Every month, the first day of the month, we put up our list of projects of the month on tomshardware.com because every day we're keeping track of and writing about great projects such as Chris's, and because we want to highlight them so folks can replicate at home and be inspired and do cool things, and people who are doing the cool things can have some recognition. So Ash, I know you wanted to talk about some of the really standout projects of this month.
Yeah, I do actually, and that's actually how we got Chris this week. He was featured on not just his Geiger counter project, but he made his way to the top 10 list. So if you put your project online, we'll find it. Yeah, we'll find you. So let me get the camera switched over here.
We're big fans of that list over at Balena. We always look at it every month and try and spot all the cool things. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun, and people put together some really cool things. And I like showing it off. So this week, I'll just touch on some of what we've got going on so far. And this is just for the month of September. And I think with 2020, we've all been stuck at home, and apparently the Pi community has taken this as a serious opportunity to make a lot of Pi projects, because it's been hard to pick out just which ones to feature, let alone the top 10. Like, even though we call these top 10, don't think for a second we don't appreciate everything else that didn't make its way to this list, because it's hard to pick favorites, so to speak. But one thing that's really cool is this Raspberry Pi clear cassette display. This guy managed to cram a Raspberry Pi Zero into a clear cassette tape, and it has a little P. Maroni LED display, and it can send messages across it and even vibrate to go off. And it looks like, I don't know, there was a lot of hardware back in the 80s and 90s that had that clear aesthetic, and it looks like it was really just banking on that, and it paid off, I think. It looks really, really good.
Some of us stored our computer programs on those, but that was more like the 80s.
Let's see.
I remember those days well.
I remember them taking an inordinate amount of time to load.
Yeah, exactly. Now you wait for your programs to download for 5 hours, then you just waited to save for 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's just because GTA is 90 gigabytes. Or GTA 5, I should say. I hope GTA is not 90 gigabytes. Raspberry Pi Tricorder. This project is even cooler. I mean, I don't even want to say cooler. It's hard to rank them, like I said. But this guy, the guy who made this, he might be coming on our podcast next week. So if this piques your interest, you're going to want to check this one out. But it was his first Raspberry Pi project, and it's got an RF scanner. It's got like a thermal scanner. You could see it on the display. You could just walk around, scan your life forms. It's as close as we're going to get to a tricorder on the Raspberry Pi. But it's really neat. It also kind of has the clear aesthetic going on with that waterproof case there. We've got an air hockey table that is completely automated, as in you can play against a robot. Like, the table is going to move the striker back and forth against you. And apparently it's really hard to beat. They did a good job training their AI on this one. There's a VR meeting headset. We had Lorraine on our episode. Was it last week or the week before? But we had Lorraine on the podcast, and she was showing off her VR headset. It uses a Raspberry Pi, so you can actually look around and see your coworkers in a meeting. So that's pretty fun, because we need to bridge the communication gap we've got going on right now. We're very distant. So that was a fun one. And of course, this one, the Raspberry Pi staircase LEDs. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's LEDs that illuminate as you walk up the staircase. It's such a simple project. It took the guy just 6 hours to set up. But I don't know, if you're looking for a really fun home project, that one kind of takes the cake. It's really flashy, really easy to set up. So that's just a taste of what's going on. There's a whole lot more projects to check out. You need to go to tomshardware.com to find the full post and see what else everybody's been up to.
Yes. So every month we update it, and you can see prior months there as well. If you go to tomshardware.com, it's on the homepage right now, but always at /features/best-raspberry-pi-projects. And we are really proud to maintain this list and keep highlighting the great stuff. I encourage anyone who has a cool project to reach out to us. We'd love to highlight it. You can reach out to me personally at avram.pil, my first name dot my last name .piltch at futurenet.com, and we would love to highlight cool projects, cool Raspberry Pi projects, because that's what we're all about. Now, Justin from our chat room has a really interesting question I want to bring up. He asks, any ideas and resources for home automation would like to implement with CCTV and security? Wow, there's so many possibilities there. Who wants to take this one? Chris, it sounds like something that you guys have looked at Belena.
I've got one suggestion. There's I think it was last week or the week before we updated Etcher. So one of the projects it shows is a CCTV project, and it's promoting this software called Kerberos.io, which basically lets you convert a Raspberry Pi and a USB webcam into a CCTV camera, which is quite a cool startup project.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. I've seen some great stuff with, I think, turning your camera to MJPEG, and I've seen some great things with motion detectors. Les, have you done any stories on this? Not for us, but I think you've done some. Have you done some stories on motion detection?
Yes, a few years ago for Linux format. Motion iOS is one of the tools to use. It just converts the Raspberry Pi and the official camera, so any of the cameras, into CCTV that you can control over a web interface. If you download the operating system called Diet Pi, it's a stripped-down version of Raspbian, or Raspberry Pi OS as it's called now, and it has a great interface, an encoded interface, which is like a terminal menu system. And you can just go down this list and say, I want to install Motion iOS, press the button, and it installs everything and the dependencies and sets it all up for you, ready to go. You haven't even got to think about it. As long as the camera's plugged in, you've got a CCTV system ready-made.
Cool.
So
And
there's
then you set up with the video feed behind you, like what Chris has, so that you
Yeah.
have like the old school wall of security cameras.
Once you have 12 cameras, you can set up one of these.
yeah, I'm curious, Justin, if you're still there, are you trying to do it with one camera or multiple cameras? I assume that everybody wants to start with one camera, but then if you're really trying to do it, you're probably going to put the cameras all around the house, which probably means that you were installers and looking for a solution for homeowners. Yeah, so I think you definitely could control them from Raspberry Pis. You could probably, I guess the biggest question from a hardware perspective would be, where are you going to get the power from? If you're putting them around the house, are you going to put them only in places where you've got access to power? It's obviously very easy and inexpensive to mount to do the software part of it and to get the Raspberry Pi, or in this case, it's probably just cheapest to use the Raspberry Pi Zero because it's low power and you just want the camera feed. But then you have to figure out how are you going to mount it so that it's pointing where you want it, and how are you going to feed power to it on a continuous basis. The Raspberry Pi obviously makes it easy to. There's so many options for feeding power to your Pi, but you definitely have to put it somewhere. Definitely can do power over. Definitely can you can definitely do power over Ethernet if you have a power over Ethernet hat, which there are quite a few of, and there's an official one as well. But again, you would also have to have Ethernet located in that location.
Waterproof cases are another thing if you're dealing with outdoor cameras, any kind of humidity, trying to route the cables inside to keep everything secure. And you might want to look at trying to back up your camera feed data. Maybe you don't want all of the video feed to be recorded on location. Maybe you want to have a server to back up something important so it can't be compromised.
Or just record the video if it's triggered. So if there's a trigger, you can do a circular recording function in the camera in the Python library where it records continuously to a buffer. But when a trigger happens, it'll have the 30 seconds before the trigger happened and then X amount of time after. So you've got like the moment captured.
The software you're talking about earlier does that, right? Motion iOS?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to thank Justin for inspiring us to do an article, because we have to do an article on this now.
Seriously.
We have articles on different ways to do Raspberry Pi cameras, but we don't have one on Tom's Hardware about how to set up a CCTV. So we have to do it. He also asks, would the Pi be a good controller for the complete home automation, something as an alternative to Control 4?
I think the cool thing we noticed with Kerberos when we started playing with it as a camera system is that you can start to integrate with other systems because it has things like webhooks and GPIO events. So when the camera detects motion, you can fire a webhook which would integrate into some other system, or you could turn on GPIO pins and start to control hardware based on what the camera's seeing, which we thought was quite cool. But I personally run Home Assistant on a Balena Fin, which is a Raspberry Pi 3 compute module based device. And I use that integrated with some thermostats and stuff. And I find like the GPIOs are quite a good way to start to integrate, yeah.
Great. So speaking of things that are not quite a Raspberry Pi, Les has something really cool to show us. What do you got, Les?
Well, this time, yes, it's not a Pi. It's something a little bit different. It's the Nanopi Neo3. So I'm going to just switch to overhead camera so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. And I've got Raspberry Pi 4 just next to it as well. This is the Nanopi Neo3, and as you can see, it is tiny. It really is small. It's going to give you a nice side profile so you can see what's going on here. There's not many ports. In fact, that's all the ports. You've got 1 gigabit Ethernet port, 1 USB-C, 1 USB 3, and a micro SD storage. But inside this little box, we've got a Rockchip RK3328 CPU, so quad-core CPU. It's similar power to Raspberry Pi 3, roughly. And this version we've got here is 2 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. And it's got a GPIO inside. And I would show you the GPIO inside here, but the case is rather hard to get off. And I want to take some photographs for the review before I do that. But we've got a 26-pin GPIO, which we can control using Python, I believe. And it's pretty similar to the old Pi, Raspberry Pi 1, the Raspberry Pi Classic, as I call it, how it's set up. Now, this isn't something you plug into a screen or play games on or do your homework on. This is a piece of kit to plug into your network with storage and create your own home server. And for about $30, the total price for this one, it's quite a good option. It's a low power NAS, in effect, that you can plug in whatever storage you've got handy. So I'm going to be installing Ubuntu on this week and giving it a full test to see how warm it gets, how fast it gets, what it can do, how much storage we can get, and can I not break it as well. That'd be handy.
Very cool. I'm a big fan of the Nanopis. I have one of the older ones right here, but it's I guess that one's quite a new one in comparison.
Yeah, it's the latest one. It came out about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I believe, and it came all the way to the UK, but it's here now. And I'm quite excited to it. I do like Raspberry Pi alternatives. I've got quite a number. I would go and get the box full of alternatives that I have, but it's piled underneath a big box of Lego behind me. The alternatives are very different. They haven't got the same community backing as the Raspberry Pi. I mean, look at how many Raspberry Pi have been sold and how many of the people on this call right now have got probably in their houses. So it's interesting to see how these competitor boards can compete against the Raspberry Pi without that big community. So I thought, why not? Let's get one in and let's have a play.
I have that's the Neo Core there, which is kind of a lower powered one than the one Les has got, but it's a similar form factor, I assume.
Pretty similar. I'm just missing the GPIO, which is nearest to your index finger. So the one by your thumb, I've got that.
Oh, so you're missing that one. But
yeah,
what I really liked about these is they've got the eMMC on board. So that's got the 8 gig eMMC. So although it has an SD card slot to install the OS, it just copies the eMMC. And then in theory, you've got a much more reliable system.
Very true. There's no eMMC on this, I believe. No, there isn't.
Oh, that's strange.
So that is something. Yeah, possibly cost reduction. We'll soon find out.
Yeah, I'd be interested to read that.
Les, did yours come with that case already pre-installed?
Oh.
It did, yes. Normally when you buy something with a case, it's separate in the box, isn't it? So you can enjoy the wonder of this piece of PCB in front of you. But it came completely sealed. And no matter how carefully I tried to open this with my spudgers, I was going to start destroying plastic, and I thought, no, I better take the photographs first.
Chris, your model, it did not have a case on it like that?
No, this was just a bare one. I think it is $20 and it just comes just like that. It doesn't even come with the headers soldered. You get them in the box, but you have to put them on.
So do people buy these because they're less expensive than a Raspberry Pi?
I haven't really found, because I think as the point you make is that they don't have the community support. So it's quite hard to actually find people in the world using these. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get one, is because I wanted to get one and build a weather station out. That's what I was going to do with it.
Nice.
Because it's got a better CPU, faster RAM, better storage than a Pi Zero. For once you factor in the SD card, it's pretty much the same sort of price range.
Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, in the past, it was you would buy these boards, these competitor boards, because at the time they were moving further ahead with their CPU speeds and the amount of RAM that was on board, while the Pi was sticking to the tried and trusted configuration.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But now with stuff like the Pi 4, we've got these super duper fast Pis, and these competitor boards, they're trying to compete, but they're not coming up to the same grade now. And I think the first one I encountered was the Asus Tinkerboard, which had 2 gig of RAM and I think the same chip is what's inside here. And that was a fantastic piece of kit, but the software was just woeful. And the community behind it was vibrant, but it just was nowhere near the size of the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what you're trying to do at the end of the day. If you just want like a low-powered IoT device to capture some sensor data and draw some graphs, maybe you don't need the latest CPUs all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough. So Justin asks, how many devices? He wants to know how many devices he wants to know about Home Assistant. How many devices could it support, and how pleased is Chris with using Home Assistant?
Oh, I really like Home Assistant. It's super configurable. Like you can basically bend it to your whim, and there's a whole like a website full of plugins to integrate with various other things. So I have some, I think they're Tado thermostats in my place, and Tado's got an API, and then Home Assistant's got a plugin. So then you can obviously start to make rules based on the temperature of the rooms and all that kind of stuff. It's super flexible.
And how many devices does it support?
I'm not sure what Justin means in terms of like, what are we meaning in terms of devices? Like I certainly haven't hit any limits, but I'm just running Home Assistant on one Pi-based device, the Fin. But I have like 5 thermostats and cameras and various of those Sonoff, the little relay switches you can get. I certainly haven't hit any limits yet.
Cool. IoT environment, he says. So wanted to one last thing, wanted to show folks, obviously happy to take more questions, wanted to show folks real quick how to do a keyboard shortcut on Raspberry Pi OS. Not groundbreaking information, but if you've never done it before, this could save you some keystrokes. And I am a big fan of saving keystrokes wherever you can, because those are moments of your life that you'll never have back again, and you should have them. So if you can avoid using the mouse and you can hit Control-Alt something or Control-Shift something to launch your favorite program, you really should. I do this with all my computers, and you can do it on a Raspberry Pi really, really easily. So here's how. First of all, you got to go into the terminal, or you could probably do this from another editor, but the file that you want to open for editing is, and we'll do this as sudo nano, it's got to do it with sudo permissions, the file etc xdg openbox /lxd-pi-rc.xml. That's your lxde-pi-rc.xml file. You open up that file for editing, and in the file, you will see that there's a lot of XML in there, but you want to scroll down until you find, or do a search until you find the keyboard section. When you end up in the keyboard section, you will see a whole bunch of XML for different keyboard shortcuts that are built in to Raspberry Pi OS. And it's very easy to just add your own to the code. You use the beginning tag keybind, and you do keybind key equals, and this is where you put the key combination. So we have this covered in an article on our site, so you don't have to memorize it. But capital C is Control, capital A is Alt. There are a bunch of other keys, such as capital W for Windows key and capital S for Shift. So you put, if you, let's say I wanted to make Control-Alt-C launch Chromium browser, I put keybind space key equals capital C dash capital A dash lowercase c. That's going to assign that to Control-Alt-C. Then I put an action tag, action name equal quote execute. Execute is simply launch a command. Then I need to know the command to actually launch that program, and I put that in a command tag. In this case, it's Chromium-browser. I close the action tag, I close the keybind tag, and I save my file. And after I have rebooted, this will not work until you reboot, I will then be able to open something like, open whatever I've assigned, doing whatever I've assigned. In this case, hitting Control-Alt-C on my keyboard will launch the Chromium browser. Not a huge deal, But I like to say that if you can save a few seconds every time you work, those are seconds that you'll have to do other stuff. So I'm a big fan of not moving my hand off the keyboard and doing keyboard shortcuts whenever and however I can. So I think that is all we've got for today's show. I really want to thank Chris Crocker-White for coming on as our special guest today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Our pleasure. As always, having Ash and Les here, and I'm Avram, and we will see you next week on the Tom's Hardware Podcast.